man. Let me get the recording. Oh, can you give me the ability to screen share, Devontae?
I got you.
Just so I can get these little slides out. Love the thank you. I'm blind, y'all. Like this is not even I got glasses in third grade and I'm blind. So we need to just leave me be. Okay. All right. So let's just get this started. Can everybody see my screen first? Let's see. All right. So if you guys can't see something or if I'm glitching, let me know. I asked Cherie to be a liaison for the chat. If somebody's messaging, same thing goes for Devontae. If y'all are messaging something and I'm missing it, I'm gonna have Devontae and Cherie just be the spokespersons for the chat since it's my first time talking and presenting and do all this stuff. So this is speech language pathology and the church. My dad was very adamant that I put my credentials because he's like, you didn't get this degree for nothing. So behind my name, you'll see by Adriana Santana, you'll see it says CCC-SLP. That means I have a certificate of clinical competence and the study of speech language pathology. So just so you know, I am not coming out with these facts just on my own. I studied this. So this is the knowledge that has been bestowed upon me. So just to get started, I wanted to do a little bit about me. So this is just a little slide, just a snapshot of my life. I put me graduating, so y'all know that I'm not a liar and I got this degree. So you can see the family and support. For those who do not know, I feel like everybody knows this, but for those who do not know, Darian is my sister. So that's how I kind of got into BTM through Darian and Cherie. So, but you can see the fam over there. Got to shout out the Santana fam. See the hearts. Thank you, y'all. But yeah, so I graduated with my master's from Emerson College in 2022. For y'all who've gotten a master's degree or done anything post-bachelor's, shout out to y'all because it was the hardest 2 years of my life getting this degree. So to everybody that's in school, keep going because I know for me it was so difficult. But yeah, so that was me in 2022. And then over here, you'll see me with like a mask and over here with some coworkers. I currently work in a private practice. So that's just what I do for my 9 to 5. It's more than 9 to 5, but for my work, that's what I do. And then a little bit of what I do for fun. This is just me after doing a 5K. Shout out to my BFit fam. Shout out to BFit, just got in the chat. So to all my people. And then over here, I also do worship a lot of times in the churches nearby. So I do a lot of singing. I did choir in college, so I kind of just been trying to continue with that ministry. But like Devontae was saying of you having a career and that being your ministry, I kind of look at that as like hand in hand, that me physically in the church, I sing as my ministry, but the Lord still got me in the streets helping with these people. So that's kind of how I look at it both. But yeah, so what do speech language pathologists do? I kind of did a simple definition. I'm going to preface that a lot of this first half of this is going to be explaining just because I know a lot of people when I encounter them, they do not know what I do, or if they do, they know like a snapshot. It's a very wide field. So if we're getting lost in the sauce of how I'm explaining things, that's totally fine. Just do the hand raise thing or say something in the chat and hopefully I can answer a question if there's any confusion. But essentially from the American Speech Hearing Association, because, you know, got to quote your sources, speech language pathologists work to prevent, assess, diagnose, and treat speech, language, social communication, cognitive communication, and swallowing disorders. So it's very wide. So just to break down some of these terms and what they mean, I know it's going to be a little bit of medical jargon just to throw at y'all. So I'm going to try to do it as lay terms as possible. So essentially when it comes to language and speech, you might know like people who can't say like their R's correctly, and you hear little kids going like wed or whittle for their L's. That's like a little bit of articulation of how you do your speech sounds. So how I'm talking right now, how you can clearly understand the speech that's coming out. We work on helping kids who sometimes have difficulty with their sounds, or even adults too, after certain things, whether they be accidents and stuff. And then language is essentially that expressive component of me talking right now. So this is me, what I would help assess, but also auditorily understanding and comprehending what is being told to me right now. So the brain is a beautiful thing. The Lord really did his work when it came to how we understand language and how we're even talking right now, because your brain is doing so much just understanding the words that are coming out of my mouth for you to comprehend my sentences, you know, and for you to form thoughts and for you to end up expressing those thoughts. Like, it's a beautiful mechanism when you actually really like, discuss about it. And sorry if I nerd out about it. I'm in awe every single time I was in class, like, wow, the Lord really did that. But anyways, so that's like the basis of like expressively communicating and receptively communicating, what I'll be looking for usually when it comes to assessing or diagnosing if somebody has a difficulty with that. Social communication is typically due for like pragmatic, so like understanding social cues or social conversation. A lot of my kiddos who are autistic, we do a lot of social communication to understand how do conversations work and turn taking. Sometimes some kiddos have some difficulty when it comes to responding, quote unquote, appropriately, or sometimes they don't know how to advocate for themselves. So we help to provide that language and give them avenues to advocate for themselves. And then cognitive communication is a lot of those disorders, whether it be dementia, Alzheimer's, people who maybe have like a TBI, like a traumatic brain injury, or if somebody suffered a stroke. Those would be like the more cognition stuff when it comes to all that in the brain. And then swallowing disorders, there's so many mechanisms for us to even chew our food and swallow it and process it. So everything when it comes to food entering your mouth and swallowing it down, that is something a speech path would also be able to treat. Again, since the field is so wide, like people kind of specialize in different places. And I'll go into that next about those specialties. But before I move on, I know I just chucked out a lot of information of just breaking down this one thing. I know that I've been seeing a little bit in the chat, but I haven't seen much. But does that make sense for a general overview of like what this means? I'm gonna take this. Oh, yeah, autism awareness. Yes, 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 yes. Yes, of course. I was thinking about you, Sunflower, actually, when I was making this. So I'm so glad you're here just to have a parent. So she said, please nerd out. Oh, well. But yeah, so I'm glad this makes sense. We're going to keep on going, but that's essentially like the overview of speech path, very wide, sometimes a little bit too wide, but you know, that's a discussion for another day if anybody's curious about it. But here are the different ways you can be a speech path. So right now, I'm in a private practice. So private practice, people usually have like one kiddo at a time. So I usually see one kid at a time. And I kind of am able to do more of a specialized service and working, whether it be, well, it's not just kiddos, right? I'm a pediatric one right now at SLP, but there's people who do private practice that work with adults. Allows you to hone in a little bit more on like certain skills you're trying to help develop. A lot of the kids I see are 6 and under. So I see a lot of babies, which there's so much babies are learning that we don't even know, but we'll go on that into a different time. But yeah, so right now, private practice is what I do. There's school-based SLPs. I think this is the most common that people interact with the SLP. This is usually your educational environments, people who are teachers or people who are school psychologists or people who just do special ed in general. You've probably interacted with a speech language pathologist because a lot of times for an IEP or an individualized education plan, speech paths do help when it comes to academics. So what I was saying before with private practice, we can focus on different skills. It's because usually people who do school-based can only really target things that affect kids academically. So if you get picked up for an IEP for this, it's usually because you're having difficulty in school. And whatever language when it comes to reading comprehension or just understanding what's going on in the classroom or just breaking down certain concepts, sometimes we can help out with reading, or sometimes if their speech is so unintelligible that they need help with communicating to the teachers, usually those are the main modes that a speech path is used in the school. Then you have your medical, which is usually speech paths who are in hospitals or skilled nursing facilities. And usually in hospitals, you can like divide up all the different responsibilities, but I'll just be very general about it. Essentially people who are just need that medical care, whether they've had a stroke or a traumatic brain injury, or maybe even a baby in a NICU who's having difficulty swallowing their milk so early on. Like there's sometimes those difficulties, but essentially everything that deals with the medical side of that. And then you have academic and research. So people who decide to contribute to the field by doing research, a lot of research needs to be done for a lot of our studies and practices to be done. or people who work in universities, and that could be a whole plethora of jobs. But that's essentially the four main types of SLPs we would probably see. I'm just trying to make sure we got everybody. Good, Devontae, writing an IP. I know I'm trying not to check out terms too much, but I know that sometimes for context, I do have to. So thank you. Thank you for writing that out. But oh, Cherie raised her hand. Yes, Cherie.
Hi, sis. So I had a question about the school-based SLPs.
Yes.
I work in early intervention. I'm referring kids to the school, and
Mhm.
sometimes they may be picked up from the school depending on like what their delay is. When it comes to the case of a child who may have like difficulty like with swallowing, but it's not quite academic, like how does that work when it comes to like IEPs and everything?
That's a good question. So sadly, like when it comes to things outside of that, unless the kid's pretty medically complex, and in terms of like let's say, for example, I do know one kid in a school was had a swallowing goal for when it came to food consumption because of his health, like he was not for his nutrition. I know in that type of instance they'll do it, but it's not typical. It's sad. That's the one major limiting thing that people have who are speech paths an issue with the school, that you could see a kid with a completely different issue, but because IEPs are usually like legally binding documents, you only do what is accepted that is connected to the school. So how I'm a private practice like SLP, that parent would unfortunately have to go seek those extra services after school. Or there are specialized schools, they do exist. And so in those specialized schools, then they would probably target those swallowing goals. But essentially it depends on your district, depends on your resources, because your school could have an SLP but not be knowledgeable in that. So it kind of really depends on, like, it has to be a perfect storm of things for you to be able to do it in school. And then but unfortunately the main thing is people have to seek those extra service out. So usually with insurances, you do qualify when it comes to seeking outside services that aren't covered by school, but it does make it a little bit more tedious for people who maybe have multiple kids. So unfortunately, that's kind of like the reality of what happens if you're sending a kid that has a swallowing issue. I know that was like long worded, but I hope that answered the question.
No, that was great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course. Okay. So I feel like we are good to move on, but does anybody else have any other questions about, I'm going to also dive in a little bit more about the field. So this is just for you guys to have a general understanding, the lay of the land of what it is. But I feel like we should be good. So I'm going to move on. So why are speech language pathologists important? So I could talk about this all day, but we serve as advocates for those struggling with communication. A lot of times we're meeting kids who are so frustrating, or adults who are so frustrated that they're trying to tell us their basic needs and they're unable to. So we are kind of like that mediator, that liaison to help understand what's going on, where that disconnect is happening, and helping to advocate for them and providing the best mode of communication, whether that be verbal, sign language, or using an augmented device. So like an iPad that would have different icons for you to speak in that type of way. So that's kind of like the major thing. We also try to provide like supportive environments. A lot of times these kids could thrive if they had some type of support or some type of help in that way. And parents just don't know. It's not even like a dig to any of these parents. There's a lot of information you wouldn't know unless you went to school for it or you had somebody that was struggling with this. So we try to provide as much of a helpful environment as possible to help with language be facilitated. And to be able to do that. A bridge, that's a good one. Yes, Sunflower, a bridge. I would say that. I would say that definitely, because it's a lot of like, these are parents who want to know, this is us, this is the information, and we're just trying to transport that information to them. I would definitely say a bridge. That's a good analogy. We also try to improve social integration and overall mental health. A lot of our kids who are so frustrated and are lashing out, they just are just stuck in this cycle of not being able to communicate. So usually when we can provide help when it comes to communicating, a lot of times the behavior changes. There's a lot of difference, like a lot more happier kids, and a lot of the frustration you see, granted, there's other things that could be going on for behaviors, but a lot of time your demeanor it definitely changes in a child. You see they're a lot more relaxed and a lot more calm, and it helps them interact with kids. Some kids come to us and they don't even know how to interact with other kids. So we're teaching them like simple play skills to be able to go. And obviously you as an adult interacting in society starts from you being a kid interacting in the playground. Like if you don't know how to take turns in the playground and share, it's going to be very hard to understand more complicated concepts when you're an adult. So a lot of it's like building up that foundation for you to be able to socially get into a classroom. And if you're already in a classroom, how do you wait from that classroom to adulthood, if that makes sense? So it's a lot of like trying to bring them from one next step to the next one. Um, and also knowledge is power. I notice a lot of times that people who are coming in to see our service don't even know we exist, didn't know that there was a service that could be provided to help their child or themselves. So one of the biggest thing is just education and prevention. It's important to know that these services exist because you may have somebody in the church or you may have a family friend who maybe has a child that's not speaking and they don't know where to go next. Or you may have somebody who suffered from some type of injury that could help them when it comes to language, seeing a speech path, and they don't even know that exists too. It's just a lot of like lack of education, I think, when it comes to this field happens where people don't get their services on time because they don't even know. Um, and like early childhood services and school assistance, if you know this exists and you know you can like seek those early childhood services, they can help you later on when it comes to your academic career. Like Cherie mentions that she works in early intervention. Those early intervention services really help set you up to get on an IEP for a school, which sometimes it's such a long, difficult process. So you knowing that you have these resources or telling other people about these resources help these kids integrate into a school setting a lot more smoother. And also accidents happen and health crises happen. So people who suffer from traumatic brain injuries, these are not things that are planned. Somebody got in a car accident, somebody fell down the step, like a lot of these things happen unexpectedly. And for you to go back into society and integrate to be able to, I guess, even express yourself or plan your day, speech paths help with that. They help when it comes to like either that motor planning or they help when it comes to like decision making, helps with you deciphering. So there's so many different things when it comes to accents that we don't know that we probably really need some rehab afterwards. And also at health crises, if you end up having a stroke, you're most likely, unless it wasn't severe, I apologize if you hear my father in the background. I know he's rummaging in the kitchen, so I don't know if you can hear him. But people who suffer from strokes most likely see a speech language pathologist because they lose that language. And I don't think you realize how much language and having access to that is so connected to your personhood until it's taken from you. I've seen people who are grown adult, like males coming in here and they are just frustrated because the words are not coming out of their mouth the way that they're processing it in their brain. So the more that you know about these services and the more that you can help other people get access to them, sometimes the quicker the recovery we can help when it comes to bringing back these skills that you had. And also we help with end of life care. So a lot of times people will say for speech path, it's like from birth to death, because it really is, because people who are in skilled nursing facilities or assisted living facilities, a lot of times need that maintenance when it comes to what they already have cognitively, what they understand, to be able to rest peacefully and like live the rest of their days and have a quality like of life towards the end. So a lot of people who have dementia or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, when it comes to like usually Parkinson's kind of hits when you're later on, they seek these services to help maintain whatever value of life that they have right now until they die. So it's such a big field that I think is so important in that regard. Again, I know I chucked out a lot of information, but I'm assuming y'all are rocking with me because nobody's said anything, nobody's raised their hand. So if there's any questions about that, we can raise our hands real quick. I'm gonna go with nobody's say anything, nobody's in the chat. All right. Oh, something popped up. Hold on. Sometimes I'm a little slow with this. Yeah, love you. Sunflower, Sunflower, you're just boosting up this ego. Thank you. The Lord sent you to give me the confidence to keep talking because I'm like, I hope I'm not saying too much. My mother, my beautiful mother, yes, mommy. See your hand raised.
Sorry, I couldn't find the button so I can unmute myself. I just wanted to, I was going to interject this later, but when it came to, I just wanted to say that I believe that Adriana's inspiration into being a speech language pathologist probably happened when my father-in-law had a stroke in 2015. And when he had the stroke, we had to find a speech pathologist to come to speak with him. And they were coming to the house, and there were no English, Spanish speaking speech pathologists in the area
Yeah,
that could
bilingual.
help. And we were all taking turns translating. They did have a translator on the phone, right? But I believed, and one of the major issues that my father-in-law had was he couldn't name people's names. He couldn't like say my name. He couldn't say the city that he lived in. It was very interesting. He could speak, but if you asked him what the name of one of his children were, he couldn't say their names. But if you say point at your, but if he said point at your son and gave his name, he would point. So it's very interesting that we knew that he knew things, but he just couldn't articulate it. So that was my first, they called that aphasia, right? That was our first interaction. So I think, Lulu, that's probably what affected you or inspired you, should I say. Also, early intervention, and Lulu, I'm going to use you as an example. um, it's very interesting. I just want to say this, and I'm saying this because I think it's important. Parents, for those of us who are parents, right? Or if we have friends that are parents, it is hard for a parent to understand that their child needs help with something because we're perfect, and why isn't our child perfect, right? And it's hard for us to, I don't know, Cherie, if you can interject after, but I believe that when we're told that our child needs something or is behind on something, we either take it personal or we start talking about the American institution of the United States of America, because where I'm from, all we have to do is work harder, right? So I believe that there's all these beliefs that we have, and I know, Audrey, that this is not part of your, I just want to tell parents that if you have a chance to do early intervention with your children, do it, because it's going to be less painful. Sometimes it's about us and our ego as parents, but it really needs to be about our children. So the example I'm going to use with Audrey is, even though this doesn't have to do with speech, it had to do with math. And Adriana found out later on in life that when I did a small little assessment on her, that she was going to need some assistance with math when the math got complicated, right? And so I said, okay, but I live in an inner city school, so um, the girls had access to an inner city school, and I really wanted to put them in private education because I was balancing between public and private and the pros and cons. And so private education wasn't going to provide any help. So I took it upon myself, that Audrey didn't know, to help her with some things that she didn't know that she needed. I only revealed it to her at the end. But it was a risk that I took. Parents, I'm telling you right now, if you can have access to help, get the help. Do not let your pride stand in the way. And your kids, the efforts that you have to do to help your children is more important than anything else in the world, because God gave you these children so you could do the best job that you can. Okay, Lulu, that's all I'm going to say.
I knew y'all. I knew y'all, she has to say something. I knew. But she's not wrong. A lot of times the biggest thing I encounter with parents is acceptance as being the biggest struggle. But I know that Devontae has his hand raised. So I'm going to let Devontae say his spiel. What are you going to say?
Oh yeah, I have a question. Okay,
Mhm.
so I think this question is inspired by the movie I watched yesterday, the story of Possum Trot. I watched that in theaters yesterday. It's regarding like foster care in the system, and I'll stop right there with that part, just in case somebody wants to go watch it. But in terms of like either from your perspective or people that you work with or just SOPs in general, how often do you guys like have to advocate for um, I would say kids that are struggling with speech, and also them being in environments that are not, conducive or unsafe for them, or even unsafe family environments?
Mercy. So Well, one, I saw Danielle's comment. Thank you so much, Danielle. Thank you. But how often, I feel like it's a lot all the time in so many different ways. And sometimes you're advocating for these kids against their own parents. Sometimes you have kids who, like, let's say, for example, have decided that part, yeah, Sharino. Like, sometimes you're like fighting, you think this enemy, or this quote unquote enemy you're fighting should be on your side. And sometimes you're like, you have to be very like patient in how you're wording things. But I had a family who their child was nonverbal, like they just weren't going to be verbal, and that was totally fine. We were trying to give them access to using a device to be able to communicate that way. But a lot of times you have parents who are so against using a device because they're like, I want my child to talk. My child just needs to talk. And that's what it is. And it's a lot of like education in the sense of like, your child may talk with this device, they may not, there's not a guarantee, but we're trying to be able to say their needs. And I just remember one parent being like, well, we just decided we're not gonna want to do that anymore. We're not gonna use this device anymore. And you have to take a deep breath. I will say patience was not a virtue I was gifted with. The Lord grew it in me and is still growing it in me daily. But really had to grow it with me when talking to these parents, advocating for these children, because I had to really break it down that like, you saying that they don't need this device is saying that they don't have the right now to ask to go to the bathroom. Now they don't have access to ask to eat. Now they don't have access to ask for more of anything. And a lot of times we're in those positions where you have to break it down to those basic human needs for them to understand that like, you wouldn't know any other way that they're asking for something other than them pulling your hand and pointing. And that they deserve more. They deserve a lot more, it's not integrity I'm looking for, dignity. They deserve a lot more dignity. So a lot of times we have to break that down to parents and advocate for them, being like, your child is communicating this way and it's still beautiful. We're just trying to help it get it to a different part where it's like even stronger. So it's a lot of like acceptance of diversity. It comes to language we have to do advocacy for. And then sometimes what you were saying about unsafe environments, sometimes when you work with these kids for so long, you start noticing like when a kid is acting out, why? And you start being able to sorry, I just saw Danielle pulling her hand and pointing is a nice way. I get the screams and punches too, girl. I get them too. Not for the weak. But a lot of times when you're working with children, you start being able to say like, you usually act this way. Why are you acting different today? I recently had a child who was super easy to work with. We're just doing articulation. She comes in though, completely acting out. And it was a behavior that was like not seen before. And I won't even go into details what was happening, but basically, as I was like probing and getting to know what was going on, she expressed to me some abusive behaviors that were happening in her home. And at that point, when you work with kids for so long and you start really like, you have to really listen, because sometimes these kids will say a sentence here and there and you're like, I don't understand what you're saying, and you have to put it together. Like, so like Sunflower was saying, putting the pieces together. And in those moments, that's as much as advocacy you have to do in that as well. So I remember having to go to her grandmother and saying, this is what she reported to me, having to say I'm a mandated reporter, having to call CPS, having to do it from a report and all this stuff. But advocacy is one of those things they don't talk about in grad school that you really have to do. They say you have to do it, but they don't really let you know like how often you really have to do it. And not just for children. I see people having to do this with their adult patients as well and trying to fight for their dignity. That's the biggest thing I think that people don't realize, that like once you strip somebody of their communication, you're stripping them a bit of their personality. You're stripping them a bit of like their soul, I would say, because like you communicating is really connected to your soul. I know it's very long-winded in answering, but hopefully I answered a portion of your question. But what mommy was saying too is very true, that a lot of times acceptance is one of the biggest things you like parents struggle with. And a lot of times parents are very intuitive and they know what's going on with their child. They just may not feel ready. And it's okay if you're not ready, but you got to get ready when it comes to some of these things. And that's what another thing too, I feel like we try to y'all just blowing up my ego in this chat, y'all. Do you see these people? So nice. But you have to get ready, because a lot of these communication disorders, a lot of these things can also be precursors to other things. A lot of times if a kid has issue with their language, they might have some issues with their attention. And sometimes they might be precursors to maybe an autism diagnosis. Sometimes they're precursors to an OCD diagnosis. You know, a lot of it's connected a lot more than people think. Danielle, I see your hand is raised.
Okay. I don't know if this is off topic and it's very specific, but I just
Mhm.
wanted to get your take on it as an SLP.
Mhm.
So I have a student who's coming to me next year. All of my
Mhm.
students are on the spectrum.
Mhm.
He's a gestalt learner processor.
Mhm.
And so he will watch certain shows and learn the language of that show, and that is how he communicates. So primarily, like, you know, he will reenact the scene in order to tell us how he's feeling, things like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's gotten so severe that he has like his own code of how he speaks, and he only speaks in that code. Like certain colors represent feelings for him or numbers for him. And it's very, very specific. However, sometimes it changes. And so it's not always cut and dry. And so coming into the school year next year, I'm wondering, how much do I indulge in trying to exactly kind of be like a secret agent and like try to figure out and crack his code for the gestalt like processing, and how much do I push that he needs to learn? Like the color thing is fine. Like red can mean angry, blue can mean sad. Like that I have no problem with. But in terms of like him saying the number 7 and meaning that he needs to use the bathroom, like how much do I feed into that? Because no one else knows his language. And so if I'm the only one who it'll be easy for us as the year progresses to learn that and interact with him that way. But a lot of language, it needs to be kind of like universal, and other people need to also, because he won't only be with us, he'll be exposed to some gen ed students, some gen ed teachers. They won't know his quote unquote language. So I just wanted to get your take on like, how do you feel perhaps maybe I should try to tackle it for next year?
Well, Danielle, we're gonna have to have like a part 2 conversation of what I'm gonna say right now, because I feel like I'm gonna try to be like quick, but also like comprehensive in answering. For those who don't know, just a really quick context, Gestalt language learning is usually people who understand language in terms of blocks and chunks. So for example, we had I'm assuming that we all learn language and process it the same way. If not, I'm so sorry, but usually people learn, understand language word by word. So you start learning like when you're a kid, like, oh, more means I get this stuff again. Or like when you say help, that means someone's gonna come and assist me. That's usually how people learn. For Gestalt learners, they learn in these chunks. So what Danielle is saying of like this kiddo, they're learning that this phrase gets this reaction, or this particular thing gets another reaction. So in terms of like tackling it, a lot of times you have to present other gestalts for them to learn. So for example, I think you said 7 was to use the bathroom or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you would end up trying to do another phrase and present it that way of being like, let's go to the bathroom, let's go to the bathroom. And you model it to the point where when he has to use the bathroom, then he'll say, let's go to the bathroom. And you'll know, oh, you need to use the bathroom. So it's like at first when getting to know him, I would say like starting to understand the code first of what he's substituting. And then once you understand what he's substituting what for, then you can start tackling, what do I want to model for him to say when he has to use the bathroom or when he has to go do this. Again, I feel like you and I will probably need to talk later about how to do that, because a lot more detailed, which I don't even mind at all. I can also send you like handouts on that. But yeah, that's like, you kind of like have to indulge at first to understand his language. And then you start setting the expectation of modeling what you want to help make it more functional, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
we could chat though at a different time
For
because
sure.
it's a lot. It's a lot. And like, that's a lot to tackle as a teacher. It's a lot to tackle as an SLP doing that. So I can't even imagine as a teacher, when you have other kids and you have other kiddos with autism, it can be a lot. It can be definitely a lot. And then I think Mommy's questions, I think also we'll push those questions for a separate conversation, because I think we can go into a rabbit hole of this individual child. Kind of don't want to get us too super off track. But we shall have a part 2 of that particular thing. And yes, he should have goals in his IEP though. And the SLP, there should be the ones like be tackling that mainly. But again, we shall move on and talk about the next portion. But I feel like that was good. If everybody seemed to understand what the SLP is, and don't be shy to raise your hand if any questions. I love talking about this all day, so I can just, whatever question you got, I love to answer. And if I can't answer, I'll be honest, because we don't like being fake out here. Moving on. What is the first instance of language being utilized in the Bible? I want to see this in the chat. What do we think the first instance of language being utilized in the Bible? Because, you know, this is BTM, so we got to bring what we're learning right now back to scripture. So I kind of want to see people's responses. Yang said creation. Does anybody else have any ideas of language being first utilized in the Bible? You know what? I'm gonna make a ban for the Santanas to not respond first before everybody else in BTM.
Wait,
That's
can you
question.
repeat your question?
The question is, what is the first instance of language being utilized in the Bible?
Like Tower of Babel?
If that's what came to mind, then we're just collecting the answers at this point. And then we're gonna go on.
Or Let There Be Light? Child, I don't know. That's the first thing I remember being spoken.
You know what? Since the Santanas have let out, and since we got other people answering, it is Let There Be Light. Again, I'm banning the Santanas from answering first for the next question, y'all. So they can't, because they already heard this presentation. So we're moving on. But yes, this is the first time we see language being utilized by the Lord. They have cheat codes. They do have cheat codes. They do. Now they want to be all sad with their faces. Moving on. But yeah, so language is literally how the Lord created everything. We see the first part when it comes to let there be light, and it goes on and so forth. So that's definitely that first instance that I was thinking of when it came to language. What are other instances of speech and language being utilized? We heard the Tower of Babel. Is there any other examples y'all want to put in the chat that come to mind when it comes to speech and language being used as a device in the Bible?
Yes, there was a story with Jesus and a mute man, and did he put mud on his mouth? Or no, I can't remember.
Mud in his eye.
Oh no, that's a different person then. No, but he couldn't speak, and then he said like "Ephatha" or something like that, and then he could speak, something like that.
Tammy, you on it. You on it, girl. You on it. She said, I have the answers. I have the answers. Yes, no, that's a very good example. Definitely a good example. Let's see. Not for instance, but tongue being used for like sunflower is like you saw my slides. We're gonna hold on to that comment, sunflower, for later on. But you onto it, girl. You onto it. Let's see. Lazaro. Oh, come out. Yes. Not in Spanish, but this is a fun fact about Angela Santana, y'all. Since she was married to my father and she converted to Adventism, everything is in like Spanish for her when it comes to that Bible. Like a lot of the scriptures she knows is only in Spanish. So definitely that. But yeah, life and yes, Danielle, again with sunflower, you're on it, girl. We're gonna be circling back to that soon. But yeah, definitely those are some good ones. Some good ones. Not the loophole. Yeah, it is a loophole though. That is a loophole with her speaking in Spanish. But yeah, so anything else that comes to people's mind when it comes to, we're going to talk about like 3 different examples, but if there's anything else that comes to mind when it comes to language being utilized to pop in. Joab, do not be encouraging my sister over here. Do not be encouraging her. Hands, I know y'all got that little podcasting bond going on, but not today. Not today. Moving on before these people in this chat. Mercy. Speaking in tongues. Danielle, it's like you were talking to my mom this morning. My mom brought this up this morning. Because speaking in tongues has so much of a theological perspective on that, I will leave that to my brother in Christ, Devontae, to answer at a separate time, as my degree limits my understanding of that currently right now. So, peep out for the part 2, y'all, for this thing. Balaam and the donkey. Yeah, the donkey. That's a good answer. Forgot about that one. Yes, yes. Now I'll text you my answers moving forward, best friend. I'm not looking at this chat anymore, y'all. I'm moving on. Anyways. But yeah, so one of the first times we see is a Tower of Babel. And I ended up putting a little bit of the scripture just because, we got to cite our sources out here, what we're reading. But essentially we saw that the earth and land, everybody had one language. And because of their desire to build a tower so high they could reach the heavens, the Lord said, we got to confuse these people. And I was looking into it, and I believe that the term babbling that is used with babies, when babies start to talk and they start making them sounds, I was looking into it, and it looks like it is connected to the Tower of Babel. Babbling, Babel. You learn something new. You learn something new. But it seems like those two were inherently connected. Moving on, we have the story of Zechariah. For those, I'm going to give a brief overview, but essentially he was told that he was going to have a son, but he was so confused, he thought his wife was too old. And then Gabriel was like, because you don't believe in what I'm telling you, you're not going to be able to talk. And I think this is one of the bigger, powerful times we see that someone's actual ability to speak is taken away due to their lack of faith. And it said throughout the story that people, in order to understand him, he had to use signs to describe what he wanted. I want to think that this is probably one of the earlier instances we see sign language utilized in history. I am not super well versed in science, so I can't fully say that, but that is my understanding. But this is one of the first times we see, not the first time, but one of the major times we see that speech is being used as in God's favor when it comes to understanding and faith. And then to bring it home when it comes to not just these instances where we see a donkey talking to us or an angel appearing in front of us, we see what happens when we use our language negatively when it comes to the story of Miriam and Aaron. So I popped up the story just because I feel like when it comes to our day-to-day, I'm talking about a lot about the ability to speak and a lot of just being able to have that. But this is really honing on to what happens when we take this gift that the Lord has given us negatively. And just to backtrack a little bit, this story starts off with Aaron and Miriam speaking against Moses' wife and why he chose the wife that he chose. And I don't have it up here, but in the beginning of this chapter, in Numbers 12, you see them say, doesn't the Lord speak to us too? Doesn't the Lord come to us? And I'm only going to read this one just because I thought it was pretty powerful how the Lord addresses them. He very much says, listen to my words. When there's a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to them in visions. I speak to them in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful in all of my house. With him, I speak face to face, clearly, and not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And I think this is one of the biggest examples that just because you have an opinion doesn't mean you always have to express that opinion, number one. But another thing too is that as much as my degree deals with expressive language and us talking, a lot of what I do also deals with understanding and listening and knowing what to do next when you comprehend what is going on. Oh, Jerry, didn't even see your example for Moses and Aaron speaking on his behalf. Yeah, actually, I think that's one of the first instances we see of stuttering in the Bible when it comes to Moses. But I wanted to bring this story though of Miriam just because we can talk about the big examples and miracles that happen when it comes to the Lord in language, whether he was speaking through this burning bush, whether we have the donkey speaking to Balaam, whether we have Jesus telling Lazarus to step out. But essentially, when it comes to communication and language, it really matters when it comes to our day-to-day. And I kind of wanted to see the story as that first bridge of well, how our words matter when it comes to our day-to-day language and how it matters when it comes to our day-to-day interactions with others. Which brings us to our next question. Why does our language and understanding of language matter? Why is this such a big deal for us? Outside of when it comes to these basic needs that we need to communicate, language surpasses just that. We use language every single day for the majority of our day, whether us be verbally saying something or non-verbally saying something. So I wanted to ask that first, just because when it comes to your day-to-day, why does language matter to you? It could be when it comes to your career, you don't have to give a long response, but just thinking about your day-to-day, why does understanding language and using it matter? My mom said, legally, people can be sued for defamation of character. The offense is mostly verbal false accusations against another. Yeah, that's one of the bigger ones we see. It definitely matters in that aspect. Is there any other opinions of why our language and understanding matter? Connecting, yeah. That's the biggest way we connect with others, with using some form of language, whether it be verbal or nonverbal. 100%. Anybody else when it comes to why this matters in our day-to-day? It's a form we use to preach to others. It is. Effective communication and bridging the gap and breakdowns in communication. We definitely need that. Effective communication is, not everybody uses it, y'all. Not everybody uses it. You don't need a language disorder to not be able to use effective communication. Some of y'all are blessed with the ability to understand and use language and still don't know how to effectively communicate, but that's a conversation for another day. We're gonna leave that there. Intent and impact, 100%. We can't survive by ourselves. Communication is important for cohabitation. That's very true. Very true. For specificity, because if you relay information incorrectly or it can be interpreted incorrectly, can be costly. That is very true, Joab. Very, very true. Those are very good instances of why we see communication matters. And so that brings me to my next question. What is the responsibility we hold as brothers and sisters in Christ in terms of communication? What is that responsibility that we hold? Speak on behalf of others, 100%. Especially if they can't. Yes, yeah. In forms of advocacy, correct, yeah. Being kind in our communication, yeah. Devontae, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, and also in terms of your question, I thought about there's an example in the Bible with Paul when he goes to Athens. Before he even says a word, he studies the environment, he looks around, and I think that's all a part of a communication too. Before words come out of my mouth, I'm studying who are the people that I'm around, what are they into, how do they best receive information, because I also want to do my best, even though I can't stop myself from ever, saying something that might be offensive, but try my best that I use best practices. So in terms of that communication as well, observing the people that you're speaking to and understand that people might be different. What I use for somebody else may not be what I use for another.
100%. That's so good. I really like that. Along with active listening from all senses. Like I feel like what Anna just said and what you just said, I feel like that goes hand in hand. When Sheree and I were talking about this, we were saying that a lot of times with our kiddos, if you want them to label what a cow is, they need to be able to identify what a cow looks like. Like that's kind of the first thing. You can't label something without being able to identify it. And I feel like that is something that should be viewed at for a lot of our issues that we go through. You being able to identify how somebody's needs need to be met and be able to like help them and be able to help label the words that they may need, or help label the help they need. You need to be able to look around and be aware of your surroundings in that type of way and actively be part of that listening, 100%. Is there anything else that comes to people's minds when it comes to the responsibility we hold in terms of our communication? And if not, that's totally fine. One of the biggest things I think is that we are a liaison for the Lord. So how we present and how we communicate with others is a reflection of how the Lord probably communicates to us. Or if you're not communicating with the Lord, it's very evident that you're not communicating with the Lord by how you communicate with others. I see something in the chat first. Let's see. A quote. Oh, my mother. Yes, mother. Would you like to read your quote aloud? Yeah, I see your head.
Well, I as an Adventist for 35 years, I have issues with us practicing this quote, right? So when you offer your gift to God at the altar and you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there at the altar. Go and make peace with that person and then come and offer your gift. I believe that a lot of pride has entered our church.
Mm.
And notice it didn't say when you go leave your gift and you remember that you have something against your brother. That's not what you're remembering. You're remembering that your brother has something against you. And I have found in my experience, the most painful thing I've experienced in church is having an honest conversation with somebody who's upset at you or who's mad at you. We would rather practice sitting in the other side of the church and away from the people that we're mad at than practice actually making peace with them. And we're called to be peacemakers. And peacemakers are supposed to use peaceful language. And we're supposed to try to get along. We're not also supposed to allow a person to manipulate you by saying that they're angry at you all the time to get you to do things that they want. This is where the wisdom and prayer comes in, right? But also, we're not supposed to let the sun fall down when we're angry, right? So these are things that if we practice these two basic things, don't let the sun fall down in your anger, and go and make peace with your brother, I believe that we would avoid a lot of heart pain, right? But in order for you, so let's say, for example, I want to make peace with my brother. There's also another verse that says that if you go and talk to your brother, and Devante, you can help me because now I'm speaking in English. And so that says that if you go and speak to your brother, it doesn't work out, go with the pastor and elders. And then if that works out, déjalo como gentil, right? And leave them, right? Because you've done your best. You went to speak to them one-on-one. You took the elders with you. They still got some problems. That's on them, right? Because you did your part. But I believe that we have major issues. In order to do this, you have to have a sincere heart, right? And sometimes you can have the sincere heart and the person you're trying to make peace with doesn't have a sincere heart. It's a struggle. You want to be able to work it out. What do? You end up praying. But in order to be able to accomplish this, we need to have effective communication. And you're absolutely correct, Lulu, that people can misinterpret things all the time. I'm gonna, in the parenthesis of my story, I had one student one morning that was getting rings and putting them in all her fingers, and I was like, "What's going on, B?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm getting ready just in case I have to get into a fight." I go, what? We're planning on already getting into a fight, so we're putting rings on all of our fingers.
At 8:30 in the morning.
Exactly. How did you know? Were you there? So anyways, so I said, what happened? And this is literally, I was at my locker, and every single time I go, I was at my locker, the girl who had her locker next to me said, who? And I said, who, right back. I said, uh-huh. And then what? That's it. Does she think she's going to talk to me this way? I said, we didn't even use words. She said, who? And you said, who back? I didn't like her tone. She didn't even use a word. But she was already, listen, because of two who's, they were already putting rings on all their fingers, and they were going to fight it out. So you don't even have to, in order to offend another person, it takes very little, right? But anyways, to go back to this, so I used the parenthesis with the two students. People get offended all the time. I mean, really, I don't have a lot of patience for a lot of people want to get offended of everything. It's like, I want to say grow up, but then, hey, maybe I need to pray on my patience for the other people. But we really, as a church, we are not practicing this. Had we practiced this, there would be less of a divorce rate at the church. So I'm telling you right now, we need to be able to do it ourselves. But the church on a whole is not holding anybody accountable to this type of behavior, which I believe this is where they failed. But even though they have failed, we as a sheep do not have to fail as well. I believe that we should all put it in our hearts to be able to go speak to somebody. And if I'm going to be brave enough to go talk about another brother or sister to another brother or sister, I better be brave enough to say it to them, right? It could be that I may need advice, and maybe I have this person. I need to talk it out with another person so the person can encourage it. That's okay. It's an encouraging conversation, but the encouragement has to be, well, try talking to them. Let's start praying about it so God can give you an in on how do you approach this, right? But if it just ends with you just talking about it with another person and never going to them, to the other people that you're talking about, that is wrong. That is wrong. And if you don't want to ever say to the other person, then don't say it to anybody else, because I don't think that it's fair that another person has to hear your feelings via a liaison.
Mhm.
You should be able to speak directly to a person. It's hard. Some of us are not confrontational, and we believe that this is confrontation, but it's not called confrontation when you're a peacemaker. It's called peacemaking. Do you see the difference? Confrontation is you're gonna be putting up your dukes and you're gonna go defend your point. Peacemaking is a very different thing, and I think that we are not taking this as seriously as we should as a church. That's all I have to say.
Man, and then just like to close, I'm just kidding. They're all, I'm like, what I gotta say? No, you're 100% correct. I think that a lot of times people do not understand that that a lot of the effectiveness of communication really is on each individual brother and sister and should not be put on the responsibility as the church as a whole. In the sense that we all hold our own personal responsibility in terms of communicating effectively and sincerely. Sometimes people, I've noticed, will communicate, but it's not sincere in how they feel, and it's not sincere in helping the other person how they feel. Because there's definitely instances where people will go to confront in the name of peacemaking, but it's only because you're nitpicking someone's lifestyle and not necessarily caring about who they are as an individual. So sometimes that does happen as well. And I think that when I thought about this question of what is our responsibility, I think it really goes back to looking inward and like really thinking about how our actions are being perceived by others. Because communication is not just because you said happy Sabbath to somebody or you just decided to say like, oh, God bless you, I'll pray for you. That's not just types of communication. We have so many forms of nonverbal communication we do all the time as individuals that we may not realize the signals we're sending to other people nonverbally. If you do not seem approachable or do not seem open, or you seem to be judging, or you seem to be doing all these stuff that is negative, it comes across in your nonverbal communication. So just because you told that person happy Sabbath with your fake smile, don't take away the fact that you said that with your fake smile, and we can see the insincerity in your face because you're communicating something, regardless of what this is saying. This is going to be communicating the real truth. Because I think a lot of times when we think about this, we think of the superficial and we think about, oh, so-and-so, I'm praying for you. You can tell when someone's being phony when they say they pray for you and they're actually not praying for you. At that point, just walk away. At that point, just walk away. But that's another thing I wanted to emphasize. A lot of what I've talked about, what I do, deals with how people understand and deals with how people speak. But non-verbally, I have to decipher a lot of what these kids want and what these kids feel, just because they don't have the language to do so. And if you don't know how to identify how you feel and label how you feel, people are going to be deciphering what you're putting out, if that makes sense of what I'm trying to say. It's something that we need to be a lot more intentional about when we're interacting with individuals, not just in the church, but individuals in our day-to-day life. And I think that's bring us to scripture. So I kind of want everybody to take out their Bibles, their phones, whatever. And I really want us to dive into Proverbs 18. Y'all were getting there with the verse 21. But I figured what would be best is for us to read through this whole entire thing. She said, I think this would be good for parents. So, thank you, Sunflower. I'm going to open us up to Proverbs 18. So I'm physically opening up my Bible. I don't know how long it's been since I've done that. Lord, do not strike me, but I'd be opening up on my phone. And let's see. And I kind of want us to read this together. Devontae, can you do me the honors of reading verses? Well, you don't have to read the whole thing. Maybe you can read up to verse 10 and then I'll take it away with reading the rest of it.
Okay. So read up to verse 10. All right.
Yes.
Sounds good. All right. So it says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise adorns knowledge, but the mouth of the fool gushes folly. The eyes of the Lord are everywhere, keeping watch on the wicked and the good. The soothing tongue is a tree of life, but a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. A fool spurns a parent's discipline, but whoever heeds correction shows prudence. The house of the righteous contains great treasure, but the income of the wicked brings ruin. The lips of the wise spread knowledge, but the hearts of fools are not upright. The Lord detests the sacrifice of the wicked, but the prayer of the upright pleases him. The Lord detests the way of the wicked, but he loves those who pursue righteousness. Stern discipline awaits anyone who leaves the path. The one who hates correction will die.
You finished off verse 11, right?
Oh,
Did you read the whole thing? Because your
yes.
version is different from my version. So I just didn't know.
Okay. Death and destruction lie open before the Lord. How much more do human hearts? That's
me-
verse 12. Yeah.
So you just read verse 12? Okay.
Verse 11. You can start.
Okay.
Verse. Yeah.
This is, I guess I'm reading the New Living Translation. Everybody reading their things. Haughtiness goes before destruction. Humility precedes honor. Sprouting off before listening to the facts is both shameful and foolish. The human spirit can endure a sick body, but who can bear a crushed spirit? Intelligent people are always ready to learn. Their ears are open for knowledge. Giving a gift can open doors. It gives access to important people. The first to speak in a court sounds right until cross-examination begins. Casting lots can end arguments. It settles disputes between powerful opponents. An offended friend is harder to win back than a fortified city. Arguments separate friends like a gate locked with bars. Wise words satisfy like a good meal. The right words bring satisfaction. The tongue can bring death or life. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. So love this chapter. I really like this chapter too, Tammy. So it was interesting because Cherie and I were talking about this verse 21, because I think that's the first thing that people think about when it comes to like the power of the tongue. And I'm just gonna pop up these verses up here. So if you guys want to read it, like look at the screen while we're talking and stuff. But when reading that last verse, I was kind of like, I wonder what the rest of this chapter is really talking about, because I kind of want to put it into context. And I felt like this had so many gems when it came to being intentional in communication, not being quick with it, and being mindful and open. I think a lot of times, when we feel in our heart of hearts that we are so like, I feel like this feeling, and this is what I need to do, and this is what I need to say, we sometimes skip that step of really analyzing and reflecting on why we're feeling whatever we're feeling before we express it. I know it's very difficult to do that in real time when we're all caught up in emotion. But it seems to me that when we look at these verses and we look at this chapter, that it's really wanting us to slow down, especially when it comes to, and this version, I think this is I can't remember what version this might be, the NIV, but here when it's like on verse 7 of the fool's mouths are their undoing and their lips are snared to their very lives. I don't think we realize how much we cause damage to ourselves if we are not actually intentional or careful with our wording and how that sometimes can be the cause of some of our demises when it comes to that. And I really wanted to, that's some of the things that popped out to me when it comes to this chapter, and really for us to reflect on when we come to language and communication in general. These are things that we often take advantage of, and we don't realize the gift that it is to, even for me to be able to express myself in this manner. And that as much as that this is a gift, is much as a responsibility, and it holds so much power. You know, with great power comes great responsibility. And it's something for us to really think about when it comes to our day-to-day interactions, especially if we call ourselves brothers and sisters in Christ. If we are Christ followers, we should not be so loose with our tongue. If we are Christ followers, we should be a lot more intentional speaking life into other individuals before we criticize. And I think that for me, when it came to analyzing and thinking about what I do and how this connects to the Lord, I came with the conclusion that the Lord is going to use me as a vessel and use me as a voice for his mission and his ministry. And if I'm going to be taking on that with him in that partnership of being used as a vessel, I need to be really tapped in and connected to what this being, what my Heavenly Father is wanting me to say. Because it's only, I can be here spewing so much, but if I'm not tapped into the actual source, what am I actually speaking? In terms of, for me, I do a lot of worship leading and a lot of singing. And I know that sometimes some people prep a little bit before, you know, they have those spontaneous moments in worship and they might do some vocalizations, they might say some things. And some people do prep, but I think I've gotten to the point in my life where I do not want to predetermine the words that the Lord is wanting me to say, because I don't know who is going to be in front of me needing to hear what the Lord has to say, because I could be that first instance for them. And I think that's something we need to keep in mind, that you could be the first instance that someone's interacting with, a person who is so tapped in with the Lord that they're hearing his words for the first time through you. So that's just something I wanted us to really just to end on and think about in terms of my opinions when it came to this chapter and what I came across. But is there anything else that kind of shouted out to people while we were reading this, or just in general what we've been talking about today, that you felt the Lord was impressing upon your heart, if you would want to share? And that's okay if nothing comes immediately. If you think about this later on, you want to hit the chat or hit me up later as well. I'm so open to like discussion and conversation. I do not like to think I'm an expert in scripture, but I do think the Lord has given me the ability and the skill set to decipher it together with somebody in terms of understanding language. So if that's something that people are interested in doing later on, that's something I'm super down for. Mommy's right. Yeah, it is a good reminder of how we're supposed to speak. I'm gonna hit you later about Sephra. Yeah, of course. I would love to talk. Love to talk about Ellen. But yeah, I think that's like the main takeaway we wanted to have here. If nobody else has anything to say, I just want to also say thank you to everybody being so kind. I've never done this type of format of speaking about what I do in terms of in conjunction with the Lord. And I've always seen the connection of my career path to the ministry the Lord has given me. But it's the first time I'm actually putting it into words in a cohesive manner and actually talking about it. Thank you so much, Joab. It is the Lord. But thank you for just being such a great, like, I want to say as audience is too formal. Great group of people and just family just to listen to me nerd out a little bit and talk about it. In the future, I would love to talk to BTM more if this is something people are interested in, or in general comes to worship leading and ministry. That's another thing I'm very passionate about too. So whatever it is, I would love to come back and speak to BTM about it. But thank you so much for just being so attentive with you guys' questions and comments and support in the chat. It's very appreciative for me on my end to be able to hear this feedback. And I'm glad it was helpful in any type of way. And again, if you have any questions about this, or You know, people that need to know more of their own personal circumstances that you may not want to divulge here, and you want to DM me separately on like WhatsApp. Please, 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 please do not be shy. I am not shy about this stuff at all. I do feel like the Lord has gifted me with this knowledge. So I would love to bestow it much upon so many people if I can. So that's my spiel. I don't know how else to end when it comes to this, but that's that. So thank you again so much to everyone.
Yeah, and Adriana, I just want to say thank you again. I was thinking about this, and I was thinking to myself, I feel like if we could get this down as Christians, like across the board, then people would look at Christians like a true family.
Mm-hmm.
I think we take on the name a lot of times, but there are a number of churches that might be far from family because of the communication aspect. And the truth be told, like there's a scriptural like interpretation, understanding principle of communication, but I don't think we really tell people like you did today, like this is not something that's easy to do. It's like an actual skill. You have to really put some time and effort, and each person's different, understanding their feelings, emotions, everything, including your own, you know. And so I've heard a lot of people say, you know, Christians can be nice, nasty.
Oh,
They,
mercy. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I was watching a show, and the group of women were considered to be Christians, and the lady simply told them, you know, y'all are nice, nasty. Like you have this appearance of holiness, but when you open your mouth, you know, she was wondering what God they were serving. And
Mm.
so, you know, I really do appreciate, you know, the time and effort you put into helping us know not only about SLPs, you know, speech language pathology, but about the IEPs and so on, and your everyday, your day to day, and also the application of the biblical. And so, if we all can kind of come to a place that no matter what generation we're in, or no matter who we all come with either good habits, some bad habits, and we can work from there, then it can go a lot farther. So thank you so much.
Of course, of course. The pleasure's mine. I saw somebody ask about the theory though. I was speaking to Doug's, and I like do not have a theory. I don't want to act like I know when it comes to understanding. That's something I actually would want to learn more when talking about it. So I don't want to like disregard what Anna said. I just don't want to speak upon it because I do not know too much. I know people do have theories that it's a spirit-filled gift that the spirit bestows that upon you. In terms of actuality, I don't think us as a church acknowledge it, but I don't really have a personal opinion too much. I only typically hear people speaking in tongues through music and being caught up in the spirit in that way. But that is something I would like to know more about too. So I didn't want to disregard that comment, but you're totally right, Devante. I definitely have seen people be nice, nasty, and I don't think people understand how simple it is to minister to others when you're just kind, when you're just sincerely kind and you're sincerely yourself. I'll say this one little anecdote. I don't want to take too much time, but in my job, I have like a friend who her and her husband, they grew up in a completely different church. And they had been wanting to go to church more sometimes. And it does cost nothing to be nice. It's very true. And she knew I'd sung and she was like, oh, I want to see you sing. I want to see you sing. And the only time I sing, y'all, is on that pulpit for the Lord right now. So I was like, if you really want to see me sing, this is where I sing at church. I wasn't shy about it. And I don't pretend to not be a Christian. I'm very like, that's very much everybody knows. So every time I would sing, I would invite her and her husband would come and they would interact and whatnot. And then she told me at the end of one of the, I think this past year, we're saying nice things about each other as a coworker group. And she had said that through how I've treated her and her husband and how I've invited her to church, that I actually helped them with their goal of starting to develop their spirituality more. And when it came to attending, and through just being how I am, they were like, we just felt like you had been such a great example. And I'm over here like, I'm not really doing anything crazy. Like, I'm not over here with Ellen G. White. Am I like, let's bring it onto the Greek country. Like, I'm not really, I'm at work. I'm not really trying to put up a front or try to act a certain way. But them saying that made me like realize, and like, it was a good reminder that like our actions can be so simple by just treating somebody as like a human being and just being kind, that the Lord will take care of the rest. Like the action of me just inviting her to church, or for me just being forefront and me being a Christian or offering to pray for her whenever, that in itself impacted her so deeply. I don't think we need to do a big evangelistic series to be able to reach the people. The people are right in front of you. You know, the people, and the only way you can do that is if you communicate with them, bringing it all back. You got to communicate, you know. But that's just like one of the things I realized, that I'm so over formal ministry in that type of regard, because it's not needed. We don't see the Lord using super formal ministry, even in his time for those 3 years when he was going off. We see some instances of him preaching, and we see some instances of him doing that. But a lot of times Jesus was over here just communicating and communing with others where they were at to bring them, you know? So that's my last, hopefully that's the last little spiel the Lord wants me to say, but yeah.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And that was beautifully said. Great, great closeout. And with that, guys, as you know, we will be getting her back to come back again in her oh so busy schedule. In her oh so busy schedule. But she knows, like she said at the beginning, I'm gonna circle back. I'm gonna circle right back.
I'm about to get a text next week of, so when's the next when's the next time you can talk at BTS?
Listen, you already know. You already know it's coming. At least you know. But in all seriousness, Adriana, this was just great. Just beautiful presentation, and also just engaging as well. You know, thank you for just doing a beautiful job. And yeah, I was blessed, so I know a number of people were blessed. As we just getting ready to do announcements, close out, and go out to Afterglow, just show her some love in the chat. You know, show her some emojis, all that, telling her thank you, thank you, thank you for all that she's done today, and really bringing ministry and also speech language pathology to life. You know, in our lives. You know, especially on the Sabbath day. So yeah, and with that, just want to share with you some announcements, and then we will go. We'll have closing prayer, but just some quick announcements for you all. And here we go. All right. All right. So some quick announcements that we do have. Obviously, I'm not your announcer. Candace is not here today, but 2 announcements that we have regarding book club and also Bible study. It is summer, so we are going on a summer break for book club starting this week. Okay. And also Bible study, we are going to be taking a break, and we will start back up in late August or September. And we are going to be getting ready for a study on Revelation for Bible study. So we'll be going into the book of Revelation, talking about context, and bringing it from a different perspective as well. I remember just being a kid and it never being shown through love, the aspect of Christ's love and everything. So being able to go deep into Revelation, we'll talk about a lot of context, bring your questions as well. And so Chanel and I will be doing this Bible study together on Revelation starting in late August to September. We'll give you more details as we continue on. And also just a reminder, book club will be on break starting this week, and we will start back up on September 9th with the Awe of God. We'll continue that book, okay? As we continue on, if you would like to add us on YouTube at Breaking the Mold Ministry, feel free. We're on Facebook, Instagram as well. So feel free to add us, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have a number of different videos, all thanks to Cherie being able to upload them and editing those videos as well. And so if there are any videos that you might have missed of some of the services, you can go on. Share BTM with everyone. Don't keep it to yourself. There are some videos, whether it's at the retreat or even on here, that have been a blessing, and people are really looking for that, being real, being biblical, and being practical. So like, subscribe, do it all, and check out our website as well. Also, we are doing a BTM get-together. That's July 12th to the 14th. Once again, July 12th to the 14th. And here's our itinerary. For those that already signed up, I think it's about 9 to 10 people. so far. There's limited space for the Airbnb, and so we couldn't have everybody there. But it looks like it'll be a small group, which is not a bad thing at all. But some people said to me, "Hey, we won't be able to stay at the Airbnb. We will be able to like visit you guys, at neutral locations." And so what I'm going to do is I created a Google form. Danielle's going to put that Google form in the chat. If you are a person that obviously you can't stay, you can't actually sleep at the Airbnb, but you would like to at least meet us either at, for dinner or doing our hike, or even on Sunday, as you see on the flyer here for our beach day, for example, feel free to click yes on that Google form so I know other people that are coming outside of the guests that will be staying. Okay. So Danielle put that link in that chat. And also here's our itinerary. I'll put it in the BTM chat as well for those that actually signed up. And those that actually signed up, they will get the address. There might be, depending on how many more people sign up, there might be some extra spaces for those people at neutral locations to be with us at the Airbnb, at least, visit. And then if they want to go home, of course, at night, since they didn't sign up to actually stay there, that could be an option too. But yeah, fill out that Google form, and thank you so much for that. Also, as we continue on with our ministry, understand we are continuing to build and also working towards our retreat next year. And that's right. We have BTM get together this year, but we will not have a BTM retreat this year. And so that means we can put a lot of our efforts toward the retreat next year and also be able to have more savings as well. How do you help us to do that? Well, we have our BTM Zelle. And so breakthemoldministry@gmail.com, breakthemoldministry@gmail.com. If you want to give your tithe and offering, of course, we want you to do it out of the kindness of your heart, helping us to continue to do ministry and be something that God is leading you to do. We would love for you to do that. And so feel free to use that BTM Zelle email, breakthemoldministry@gmail.com, and help us to continue to work toward the work of God. Okay. And also, actually, before I go to this flyer, I just want to let you know that the next 2 weeks for BTM, that meaning next 2 weekends, we are going to be off. Why? Because next week is our BTM get together. So we'll be obviously seeing each other for that weekend, which is July 12th to the 14th. And the week after that, we're going to be off as well. I will be preaching at Breath of Life SDA Church in Connecticut on July 20th. But on July 19th, I'm going to say that 3 times, July 19th, and one more time, July 19th, BTM was asked to do a BTM takeover for the Brooklyn Long Island Federation. Okay. So once again, the Brooklyn Long Island Federation asked us to do a BTM takeover. And so some of our BTM members are going to do praise team at Bethany SDA Church in Queens, New York. Once again, July 19th at Bethany SDA Church. Actually, one of Joab's home churches. So he'll be singing on the praise team, but we will be there doing a BTM takeover, praise team, and also doing a mock BTM discussion for that group on July 19th. So for the next 2 weeks, we will not be having regular service, but those are the reasons why. And last but not least, for that last weekend in July, we'll be doing July 27th. We'll be doing a service entitled, Does God Send Sickness? Does God Send Sickness? Okay. And so we'll be talking about that theologically, looking at some scriptures in the Bible as well, and really looking at that because sometimes our beliefs kind of either help or are a detriment to the way we live our lives and the way we see people as well. So those are all the announcements for today. Thank you all so much, and also Adriana for presenting today. And let's pray as we close out and then go into Afterglow. Dearly Father God, we thank you so much for who you are, what you're doing. Thank you for the practicality of life that the church always has an opportunity to bring out more than anybody. That being biblical, being real, and being practical. We are so thankful. And I'm especially thankful because I'm always reminded, especially this week more than ever, that we have people doing real ministry. While sometimes we are talking to sometimes the same people, or seeing the same groups of people. We have a lot of your people, God, seeing those that, for example, speech language pathologists, seeing people that are at times voiceless and need people to advocate for. And if we have regular Christians that feel voiceless, imagine demographics that are not being able to express in the way that they would want to, or even have the ability to, God. And so your people are taking care of those that are in most need. And that's what we need to do. Sometimes the real devastation is the fact that we are missing out on loving the demographics that are a lot of times either dismissed or forgotten. And so thank you for people like Adriana. Thank you for all those, whether they are teachers or SLPs, and the list goes on, God. This is the work that you are calling us to do. And sometimes we don't step up to the plate. But God, services like this and professions and careers that go into this avenue really make the difference. And it helps not just one type of person, but it helps all people to be seen, loved, and heard. So we thank you. We honor your name, God. I thank you for the work that you're doing ministry in all places. In Jesus' I pray, amen. All right. And so with that, if you cannot stay on with us today, we totally understand, but we're going to do Afterglow for a little bit today. Just want to say hello once again. If you have to leave, thank you so much for coming on. We are grateful that you were able to join us today. But if you can stay on with us for a little bit, feel free to, as we start Afterglow.
Wait, Devonta, I just had a clarifying question. You said Queens Bethany. It's Queens Bethany or Long Island?
Sorry, Long Island. I meant Long
Okay.
Island. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. They're going to be doing the flyers, so they'll have the address on there. Yeah.
I wasn't sure because I know there is a Queens Bethany, so I make sure.
Yeah. No, it's definitely Bethany SDA Church in Long Island. Yeah. I'm sure because that's the one that Danielle dad used to pastor. Take care, Adriana. Thanks again. Hey, I'm Ruthie. All right, just want to say hello to everybody. Cherie, Darian, Tammy, good to see y'all. Christy, Matos, good to see you all as well. Jerry, Nahimi, Charlene, and of course Joab. As we start Afterglow, how's everybody doing? Yeah, let me know. How's everybody doing? How was your week? Anything interesting happen?
Joab, how are your nephews doing?
Oh my, they're doing good. They're doing great. I mean, I went to the hospital yesterday to visit my sister, and I'm not gonna lie, like I had to hold them to give them to my sister so she could feed